I didn't just realize my daughter depended on me. I allowed it to happen. That's the part people won't like. But it's also the part that explains everything. In the beginning, it looked harmless. A bill she couldn't cover. A payment that came at the wrong time. Small things that felt temporary. The kind of help any parent would give without thinking twice. And I did. I helped. Consistently. Quietly. Without conditions. But over time, I started noticing something most people ignore. Every time I stepped in, they adjusted. Not toward independence, but away from it. Their decisions changed. Their spending stretched further than it should have. Their expectations shifted in ways that didn't need to be said out loud. And once I saw that pattern clearly, I had a choice. I could have pulled back, set boundaries, forced them to correct themselves before it went too far. That would have been the responsible thing to do. Instead, I did the opposite. I didn't reduce what I gave them. I made sure nothing failed. Every gap they created, I closed. Every risk they took, I absorbed. Not because I agreed with it, but because I wanted to see how far it would go if no one stopped it. Because dependence isn't something that appears suddenly. It's something that grows when it's uninterrupted. And the longer it grows, the harder it becomes to exist without it. So I stayed consistent. Predictable. Reliable. I became the one thing their entire life could safely depend on. And by the time that dependence was complete, it was already too late for them to function without it. Once I understood the pattern, I stopped thinking about helping them and started thinking about maintaining it. That was the shift. Because helping is emotional. Maintaining is intentional. Every time they made a decision that didn't make sense financially, I didn't question it. I supported it. When they upgraded their lifestyle beyond what they could realistically afford, I made sure nothing collapsed. When expenses stretched further than their income could handle, I covered the difference without hesitation. Not because I believed it was sustainable, but because I knew it wasn't. And that was exactly the point. The more stable their life looked on the surface, the more it depended on something they didn't control. Over time, that dependence stopped being subtle. It became structure. Their house. Their routines. Even their sense of security. All of it adjusted around the assumption that I would always be there to absorb whatever they couldn't handle themselves. They didn't say it out loud, but they didn't need to. It was built into everything they did. And the more predictable I became, the more permanent they believed it was. That's how systems form. Not through force, but through consistency. I didn't interrupt anything. I didn't set limits. I didn't remind them where the line was. Because lines create awareness. And awareness leads to caution. I didn't want caution. I wanted certainty. I wanted them to believe that nothing would ever change. Because once people believe something is permanent, they stop preparing for the possibility that it isn't. If you realize someone was becoming completely dependent on you, would you pull back to protect them or let it grow until they couldn't function without you? Comment your choice. And by the time that certainty was fully built, they weren't just depending on me anymore. They were built on me. So when that Christmas conversation happened, it didn't land the way they expected it to. When my daughter told me not to come because I didn't have enough class, I didn't feel shocked. I didn't feel confused. I didn't even feel hurt in the way she probably imagined. What I felt was confirmation. Because moments like that don't come out of nowhere. They come from patterns that have been building long before anyone says them out loud. And I had already seen the pattern. The way they spoke about their lives without ever mentioning me, the way they presented themselves as if everything they had existed independently of anything I contributed, the way I slowly disappeared from their version of reality while still supporting all of it behind the scenes. That moment didn't create anything new. It revealed what had already been true for a long time. I wasn't part of their life. I was beneath it. Necessary, but not visible. Useful, but not worthy of standing next to them. And that only works when the person being used doesn't understand their position. I did. That was the difference. So I didn't correct her. I didn't defend myself. I didn't remind her of everything I had done. Because correction changes behavior. And I didn't want her behavior to change. I needed it to stay exactly the same. Clear, unfiltered, unaware. Because the moment people realize what they're doing, they start adjusting. An adjustment would have weakened everything I had allowed to build. So I accepted what she said. Completely. Not because I agreed with it, but because it told me exactly what I needed to know. The system was complete. I didn't wait long after that. Not because I was emotional, but because there was nothing left to confirm. Once a system shows you exactly what it is, the only decision left is when to stop sustaining it. And timing matters more than people think. Too early, and they adjust. Too late, and the impact loses its clarity. I chose the moment when everything was still stable on the surface, when nothing appeared broken, when they were the most certain that nothing ever would be. That was when I removed myself. Every transfer, every payment, every automatic support they had stopped noticing because it had become routine. Not gradually. Completely. I didn't explain it. I didn't warn them. Because warning creates space for preparation. And preparation weakens consequences. I wanted to see the system exactly as it functioned without me. Not the version they would try to present. Not the version they would try to fix. But the real one. The one that had always been there underneath everything I had been holding up. For the first time in years, my money stayed where it belonged. And for the first time in years, their life had to operate on its own structure. It didn't take long to reveal what that structure actually was. Stability doesn't disappear slowly when it's artificial. It collapses the moment the condition supporting it is removed. And that was the part they never considered. Not that I could stop, but that I would. It didn't take long for everything to fall apart. Systems like that never do. The calls started within days. Not because they understood what had happened, but because something felt off. At first, it was confusion. Payments that didn't go through. Accounts that didn't balance. Small disruptions that didn't make sense yet. Then it escalated. Urgency replaced confusion. Bills stacked. Deadlines passed. The structure they thought was stable started showing cracks they had never noticed before. And that was when they reached out to me. Not with questions, but with expectations. The same tone. The same assumption that whatever was happening would be temporary. That I would step back in and restore everything the way I always had. But this time, I didn't. I didn't explain what I had done. I didn't remind them of anything they had said. Because reminders create emotion. And emotion gives people something to hold on to. What they were facing wasn't emotional. It was structural. The version of their life they had built only worked under one condition. And that condition was no longer there. When my daughter asked me what was going on, I didn't give her an answer. Because the answer was already happening around her. The house she couldn't maintain, the lifestyle she couldn't support, the image she couldn't sustain. None of it existed without the thing she had stopped recognizing. And for the first time, she wasn't reacting to something I said. She was reacting to something she couldn't control. That was the difference. Because losing money is one thing. Realizing your entire life depends on something you no longer have is something else entirely. I could have fixed it. That was the part they didn't understand. Even at the end. Even when everything was already falling apart. I still had the ability to step back in and stabilize it again. Nothing about that had changed. What changed was that I chose not to. And that decision mattered more than anything else. Because this wasn't about whether I could help them. It was about whether I should. For years, I had been the reason their life worked. Not because it was built to, but because I made it work anyway. Every gap, every mistake, every decision they couldn't sustain on their own, I absorbed it. Quietly, consistently, until it stopped being support and became the foundation. And once something becomes the foundation, removing it doesn't damage the structure. It reveals it. That was what they were seeing now. Not something I did to them, but something that had always been there, hidden underneath everything I had been holding up. I didn't take anything away from them that they had earned. I didn't destroy something that could have survived on its own. I just stopped being the reason it existed in the first place. And maybe that's the part people won't agree with. Not the moment I stopped, but the fact that I let it continue long enough to become this. So be honest, is this justice? Or did she build a system just to watch it collapse? And would you have stopped early? Or done the same thing? Drop your answer below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications.